A bride walks toward her doom in white silk. A mafia king lifts her veil and sees a dead woman's face staring back at him. What was supposed to be a business transaction becomes a blood-soaked mystery that will either destroy them both or forge the most dangerous love the underworld has ever seen. If you want to know whether she survives the man who bought her, stay until the very end. Hit that like button and drop a comment with your city so I can see how far this story travels. The church smelled like roses and gunpowder. Arya Voss stood at the end of the aisle, her fingers locked around a bouquet of white lilies that felt more like a funeral arrangement than a bridal accessory. The stained glass windows filtered weak afternoon light onto rows of stone-faced men in expensive suits, none of whom had come to celebrate. They'd come to witness a transaction. Her wedding dress was beautiful, custom-made, probably cost more than her entire childhood home. The lace sleeves hugged her arms, the bodice fit perfectly, and the train pooled behind her like spilled milk. She should have felt like a princess. She felt like livestock. The organ music started, some classical piece she didn't recognize and didn't care to. Her father wasn't here to walk her down the aisle. He'd died 3 years ago, back when life still made sense. Now it was just her and Marcus, her older brother, who stood near the back of the church, avoiding eye contact like a coward. This was his fault. All of it. Arya took her first step forward. The heels clicked against marble. No one smiled. No one cried. These people didn't care about vows or love or any of the things weddings were supposed to mean. They cared about power, about debt, about watching the De Lorenzo family expand its reach by swallowing up another broken piece of the city. She kept walking. Halfway down the aisle, her eyes finally landed on him. Luca De Lorenzo. He stood at the altar in a black suit that probably cost more than a car. His hands clasped in front of him, his expression unreadable. Dark hair slicked back, sharp jawline, cold eyes that tracked her approach like a predator watching prey wander into a trap. She'd only seen him once before today, 2 weeks ago, when Marcus dragged her to some warehouse on the edge of the industrial district and shoved her in front of Luca like a desperate man offering up collateral, which, she supposed, was exactly what had happened. "She's clean," Marcus had said, voice shaking. "Never been in trouble. Works at a bookstore. She's good." Luca had looked at her for maybe 10 seconds. Then he'd looked at Marcus. 300,000, Luca had said. "That's what you owe." I know, and I swear I'll pay it back. I just need..." "You'll pay it back by giving her to me." Arya had opened her mouth to argue, to tell both of them to go to hell, but Marcus grabbed her arm hard enough to bruise. "Deal," Marcus had said. Just like that. No negotiation, no hesitation. Her brother sold her to erase his gambling debts, and now here she was, walking toward a man who looked at her the same way someone might look at a used appliance. Functional, but replaceable. She reached the altar. Luca didn't offer his hand. Didn't smile. Didn't do anything except stand there like a marble statue, while the priest, a thin, nervous man who kept glancing at the armed guards along the walls, cleared his throat and opened his little book. "Dearly beloved," Arya tuned him out. She focused on breathing, on standing upright, on not letting her hand shake badly enough for anyone to notice. She'd made a decision 2 weeks ago, the night after Marcus told her what he'd done. She could scream, she could run, she could fight, or she could survive. She chose survival. The priest droned on, something about love and honor and cherishing. The words felt like a sick joke. Arya glanced sideways at Luca. He wasn't looking at the priest. He was staring straight ahead, jaw tight, like he was barely tolerating this whole performance. Good. At least they agreed on something. "Do you, Luca De Lorenzo, take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife?" "I do." Flat, emotionless, like signing a contract, the priest turned to her. "And do you, Arya Voss, take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband?" She wanted to say no. Wanted to spit in Luca's face and tell everyone in this church exactly what kind of man he was. But that wouldn't save her. It wouldn't save Marcus. It would just get them both killed. "I do." Her voice came out steadier than she expected. "Then by the power vested in me, I now pronounce you husband and wife. You may kiss the bride." Luca turned toward her for the first time since she'd reached the altar. His eyes flicked down to her lips, then back up to her face. For a moment she thought he might skip it entirely. Then he reached for her veil. His fingers brushed the edge of the fabric. and he lifted it slowly, pulling it back over her head. The light hit her face fully for the first time since she'd entered the church. Luca froze. His hand stopped mid-motion, still holding the veil. His expression, carefully blank up until now, cracked, just for a second. His eyes widened. His mouth parted slightly. He stared at her like she'd just driven a knife into his chest. Arya frowned. "What?" He didn't answer. The silence stretched. People started shifting in their seats. Someone coughed. The priest glanced between them, confused. "Luca?" Arya said quietly. He blinked. Once. Twice. Then his face smoothed back into that unreadable mask, but his hand was still gripping the veil too tightly, knuckles white. "Nothing," he said. But it wasn't nothing. She could see it in the way his jaw clenched, in the way his eyes kept darting across her face like he was searching for something. He leaned in. The kiss was brief, mechanical. His lips pressed against hers for maybe 2 seconds before he pulled back, but his hand lingered on her jaw just a moment too long, his thumb brushing her cheek like he was testing whether she was real. Then he stepped back. "Let's go." No congratulations, no smiles, no ceremonial exit. Luca turned and walked down the aisle without waiting for her. Arya stood there for a moment, stunned, before gathering her dress and following him. The guests didn't clap, they just watched. Outside, a black car waited at the curb, some kind of luxury sedan with tinted windows and 2 men in suits standing beside it. Luca opened the back door himself and gestured for her to get in. She did. He slid in beside her and the door shut with a heavy thunk. The driver didn't ask for directions, he just pulled away from the church, and Arya watched through the window as the building and her old life disappeared behind them. Luca hadn't said a word. He sat on the far side of the seat, staring out his own window, one hand pressed against his mouth like he was physically holding words back. Arya waited as long as she could stand it. "What happened back there?" "Nothing." "You looked at me like you'd seen a ghost." His hand dropped. He turned his head slowly, and for the first time she saw something other than cold calculation in his eyes. Fear. Not of her. Of whatever he saw when he looked at her. "You look like someone," he said finally. "Who?" He didn't answer, just turned back to the window. Arya's pulse kicked up. "Who do I look like?" "It doesn't matter." "It clearly matters." "Drop it." "I just married you. I think I deserve to know why you looked at me like—" I said drop it. His voice came out sharp enough to cut, and Arya's mouth snapped shut. She wasn't scared of him, not exactly, but she also wasn't stupid. Pushing a man like Luca de Lorenzo when he was already on edge seemed like a good way to find out exactly how ruthless he could be, so she stayed quiet. The car wound through the city, leaving behind the church district and moving into quieter streets lined with trees and tall iron gates. Old money. The kind of neighborhood where people didn't ask questions because they already knew all the answers. They turned into a driveway that stretched for half a mile, passing manicured lawns and stone fountains before finally stopping in front of a mansion that looked like it had been ripped out of some European postcard. 3 stories, columns, balconies, the kind of place that screamed power. The driver opened Arya's door. She stepped out, her heels crunching on gravel, and stared up at the house. This was where she lived now. Not a home, a cage, just a prettier one. Luca walked past her without a word and headed straight for the front door. A woman in a gray dress appeared from inside, 50s maybe, with sharp eyes and a tight bun. "Take her upstairs," Luca said without stopping. "3rd floor, east wing." "Of course, Mr. De Lorenzo." He disappeared into the house. The woman, housekeeper probably, looked at Arya with something that might have been sympathy. "Follow me, dear." Arya didn't have much choice. They went inside. The foyer was ridiculous. Marble floors, a chandelier the size of a car, staircases that curved up on both sides like something out of a movie. Everything screamed wealth, but it felt cold. Empty. The housekeeper led her upstairs down a long hallway lined with portraits of stern-looking men in old-fashioned suits, probably Luca's ancestors. They all had the same hard eyes. "This will be your room," the housekeeper said, opening a door at the end of the hall. Arya stepped inside. It was nice. Big bed, tall windows overlooking the grounds, a sitting area with a couch and a fireplace. Definitely nicer than anywhere she'd ever lived. but it also had a lock on the outside of the door. She turned around. "Am I a prisoner?" The housekeeper hesitated. "Mr. De Lorenzo values security." "That's not an answer. You're free to move around the house during the day, but at night the door will be locked, for your safety." "Right, my safety." The housekeeper's expression softened just a fraction. "I'll have your things brought up. Dinner's at 7. Someone will come get you." Then she left. Arya stood in the middle of the room, still wearing her wedding dress, and tried to figure out what the hell just happened. She'd expected coldness, distance, maybe cruelty. But that look on Luca's face when he lifted her veil, that wasn't cruelty. That was recognition. He knew her face, or he thought he did. She walked over to the window and stared out at the grounds. Somewhere out there, Marcus was probably celebrating the fact that his debts were gone. Probably drinking. Probably convincing himself he'd done the right thing. Arya pressed her forehead against the glass. She didn't cry. She'd used up all her tears 2 weeks ago, the night she realized her brother was going to go through with this. Now all she had left was anger and determination. If Luca thought she was going to just sit in this pretty cage and play the obedient wife, he was wrong. She didn't know what game he was playing or why her face had rattled him so badly, but she was going to find out, and then she was going to survive him. But dinner was served in a dining room that could have seated 30 people, but it was just the two of them. Arya sat at one end of a table long enough to play soccer on. Luca sat at the other end, so far away they might as well have been in different rooms. A handful of staff moved in and out, bringing plates of food that looked too fancy to eat, some kind of fish with sauce, vegetables arranged like art, bread that probably cost $20 a slice. Arya picked at it. Luca didn't eat at all. He just sat there with a glass of whiskey, staring at her. Not in a romantic way, in a dissecting way. Like she was a puzzle he couldn't figure out. She set down her fork. "Are you going to keep doing that?" "Doing what?" "Staring at me like I'm something under a microscope." "I'm thinking." "Well, think quieter. It's creepy." His mouth twitched. Almost a smile. Almost. "You're not what I expected." "What did you expect? A doormat? Most people in your position would be crying by now." "I don't cry." "Everyone cries." "Not me." He studied her for another long moment, then took a drink. "Your brother said you worked at a bookstore." "I did." "You liked it?" "It paid the bills." "And now you don't have to worry about bills." Arya laughed bitterly. "Right. I just have to worry about being locked in my room at night and married to a man who looked at me like I was a corpse walking." Luca's expression hardened. "You should be more careful with your words." "Or what? You'll lock me up harder?" "I could do a lot worse than lock you up." "Then why haven't you?" Silence. He didn't have an answer for that. Or maybe he did, and he just wasn't ready to say it. Arya pushed her chair back and stood. "I'm tired. Can I go back to my cage now, or do I need permission?" "Sit down." "No." His eyes flashed. "Sit down." She stayed on her feet. "I didn't agree to be your pet. You bought me to clear a debt. Fine, but don't expect me to sit and smile and pretend this is anything other than what it is." "And what is it?" "A transaction." He stood up too, and suddenly the distance between them felt a lot smaller. He moved around the table slowly, each step deliberate, until he was close enough that she had to tilt her head back to keep eye contact. "You're right," he said quietly. "This is a transaction. You're here because your brother owed me money. That's the truth. But here's another truth. If you make trouble, if you try to run, if you do anything that makes me regret this deal, you won't like what happens next." Arya's heart pounded, but she kept her voice steady. "I'm not scared of you." "You should be." "Probably, but I'm not." They stood there, locked in some kind of silent standoff. Arya refused to look away first, refused to back down. Finally, Luca stepped back. "Go," he said. "Get some sleep. Tomorrow we'll talk about how this is going to work." She didn't wait for him to change his mind. She turned and walked out of the dining room, through the foyer, up the stairs, and back to her room. The door wasn't locked yet. She stepped inside and shut it behind her, then leaned against the wood and let out a shaky breath. Her hands were trembling now. She'd held it together in front of him, but the adrenaline was wearing off, and the reality of the situation was starting to sink in. She was trapped, married to a man she didn't know, living in a house that felt more like a fortress. And there was something else. That look on his face. You look like someone. Who? Arya walked over to the mirror above the dresser and stared at her own reflection. Brown hair, hazel eyes. Nothing special, just a regular face. So why had Luca looked at her like she was a ghost? She didn't have an answer, but she was going to find one. The lock clicked from the outside just after 10. Arya tested the door. Sure enough, locked. She thought about screaming, about kicking the door down, about doing something dramatic and pointless. Instead, she changed out of her wedding dress, hung it in the closet, and climbed into bed. Sleep didn't come easy. She lay there in the dark, staring at the ceiling, trying to figure out how her life had collapsed so completely. A month ago, she'd been fine. Not happy maybe, but fine. She had her job, her apartment, her routines. Then Marcus showed up with his debts and his desperation, and everything fell apart. She should hate him. She did hate him. But he was still her brother, the only family she had left. And as much as she wanted to blame him for everything, part of her knew he hadn't meant for it to go this far. He was weak, stupid, reckless, but not evil. Luca, on the other hand, she didn't know what he was yet. Dangerous, obviously. Powerful. Used to getting what he wanted. But there was something else under the surface. Something that cracked when he saw her face. Arya rolled onto her side and pulled the blanket tighter. She'd figure it out. She had to. Because the alternative, spending the rest of her life in this house, playing the role of the obedient Mafia wife, was something she couldn't accept. She'd survived worse. She'd survived this too. Date. Morning came with a knock on the door. Arya sat up, groggy, as the lock clicked open and the housekeeper stepped inside with a tray. Breakfast, the woman said, setting it on the small table by the window. Mr. De Lorenzo wants to see you in his office at 9. What time is it now? 8:15. Arya rubbed her eyes. Great. The housekeeper hesitated at the door. If you need anything, ask. I'm Mrs. Callahan. Do I call you that, or do you have a first name? Mrs. Callahan is fine. Right, of course. Mrs. Callahan left, and the lock clicked again. Arya got up and walked over to the tray. Coffee, toast, eggs, fruit, enough food for 3 people. She ate a little, drank the coffee, then got dressed in the clothes someone had left in the closet, jeans and a sweater that fit perfectly, which meant Luca's people had done their homework. At 9, someone knocked again. This time it was a man, younger, maybe 30, with a scar running down his left cheek. Boss wants you, he said. Lead the way. He didn't smile, didn't talk, just walked. They went downstairs, past the dining room, through a hallway lined with more portraits, and stopped in front of a heavy wooden door. The man knocked once. Come in. The man opened the door and stepped aside. Arya walked in. Luca's office was exactly what she expected. Dark wood, leather chairs, floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, a massive desk covered in papers, and Luca sitting behind it, looking like he hadn't slept. Sit, he said, gesturing to the chair across from him. She sat. He pushed a folder across the desk. Read. Arya opened it. Inside was a contract, pages and pages of legal jargon. She skimmed it. Most of it was standard marriage stuff, assets, property, responsibilities. But one section stood out. In the event of separation or divorce, the bride forfeits all claims to De Lorenzo assets and agrees to a non-disclosure agreement regarding all family business matters. She looked up. You want me to sign this? It's already signed, by both of us. This is your copy. So this whole marriage is just paperwork? Everything is paperwork? Arya closed the folder. And what happens if I don't follow the rules? You will. How do you know? Because the alternative is worse. She leaned back in the chair. You keep threatening me, but you haven't actually done anything. Why? Luca's jaw tightened. Because I don't want to. Then why go through with this? If you didn't want to marry me, why not just tell Marcus to find another way to pay his debts? Because I needed... He stopped. Arya waited. I needed to see you up close, he said finally. Why? That's not your concern. It is if I'm stuck in this house. He stood up and walked over to the window, hands in his pockets. For a long time, he didn't say anything, just stared out at the grounds. Then quietly, "You look like someone I used to know." Arya's pulse quickened. "Who?" "A woman. Long time ago." "What happened to her?" "She disappeared." "And you think I'm… what? Related to her?" "I don't know." He turned around. "But I'm going to find out." Arya stood up too. "And what happens to me while you're playing detective? You stay here. You don't leave without my permission. You don't talk to anyone outside this house. And you definitely don't try to run. Or I stop being patient." She crossed her arms. "This isn't patience. It's control. Call it whatever you want. Those are the rules. And if I break them?" He stepped closer. Close enough that she could see the faint scar above his left eyebrow. Close enough that his voice dropped to something almost dangerous. "Then you'll find out exactly what kind of man I am." Arya held his gaze. "I already know what kind of man you are." "Do you?" "You're the kind of man who buys women to settle debts. The kind who locks doors and makes threats. The kind who keeps his word," Luca interrupted. "Your brother owed me money. I could have killed him. I didn't. I gave him a way out and you were part of that deal. But here's the thing, Arya. I don't break deals and I don't let people break them either. So if you want to survive this, you'll follow the rules." She didn't blink. "Fine. Fine? I'll follow your rules. For now. For now. Until I figure out what you're really after." A flicker of something, respect, maybe, crossed his face. Then it was gone. "Get out," he said. Arya didn't argue. She walked out of the office, past the scarred man still standing in the hall, and back upstairs to her room. The door wasn't locked yet. She stepped inside and sat on the edge of the bed. Her mind was racing. Luca wasn't just some thug who bought her on a whim. He was looking for answers. Answers tied to someone who looked like her. Someone who disappeared. And until he found those answers, she was stuck here. But maybe, just maybe, she could use that. If she was connected to this mystery woman, then she had leverage. Information. Something Luca wanted. And if there was one thing Arya had learned growing up with a brother like Marcus, it was this. Information was power. She just had to figure out how to use it. 3 days passed before Arya saw Luca again. Not that she was complaining. The less time she spent around him, the better. But his absence raised questions. Questions she couldn't answer while locked in her room every night like some fairy tale princess waiting for a rescue that wasn't coming. She spent the days exploring what little of the house she was allowed to access. The library on the second floor became her favorite spot. Walls lined with books that actually looked read, not just decorative. She found herself gravitating toward the older sections, running her fingers along spines of leather-bound volumes that smelled like dust and secrets. Mrs. Callahan checked on her regularly. Brought meals, made small talk that never went anywhere meaningful. The woman was professional to a fault, which meant she wasn't going to slip up and tell Arya anything useful. The rest of the staff treated her like a ghost. They'd nod politely if they passed her in the hallways, but no one spoke unless spoken to. No one made eye contact longer than necessary. It was like they'd all been given the same instruction. Acknowledge the new wife, but don't engage. On the 4th day, everything changed. Arya was in the library again, curled up in one of the oversized leather chairs with a book she wasn't really reading, when the door opened. She looked up, expecting Mrs. Callahan. It was Luca. He looked worse than he had during their last conversation. Tie loosened, sleeves rolled up, dark circles under his eyes like he'd been running on coffee and spite for the past 72 hours. "Come with me," he said. No greeting, no explanation. Arya set the book down. "Where? Does it matter?" "Yes." He exhaled through his nose, frustration barely contained. "I need you to look at something." "What kind of something?" "The kind you don't ask questions about. Now get up." She stood, more out of curiosity than obedience, and followed him out of the library. They went downstairs, past the dining room, past his office, and down another hallway she hadn't been allowed in before. 2 men in suits stood at the end, guards, obviously, and they stepped aside when Luca approached. He opened a door and gestured for her to go in. The room was small, windowless. A single table in the center with a folder on top and two chairs facing each other. It looked like an interrogation room. "Sit," Luca said. Arya sat. He didn't. He stayed standing, arms crossed, watching her with that same dissecting stare. "Open the folder." She reached for it slowly, half expecting something horrible to be inside. But when she flipped it open, all she found were photographs. Old ones, faded around the edges. The kind that came from film cameras, not phones. The first photo showed a woman standing in front of a fountain, young, maybe early 20s, dark hair pulled back in a ponytail, sundress, smiling at whoever was taking the picture. Arya stared at the photo, then she looked up at Luca. "This is her," she said quietly. "The woman I look like." "Yes." She looked back down at the photo. The resemblance was unsettling, not identical. This woman's face was a little rounder, her smile wider, but the bone structure was the same, the eyes, the shape of the mouth. They could have been sisters. "Who is she?" Arya asked. Her name was Elena Corso. Was? "She's dead. Or missing. No one knows for sure." Arya flipped to the next photo. Same woman, different setting. This time she was sitting on a bench in a park, reading a book. Whoever took these photos had been close to her, close enough to capture casual moments. "When did she disappear?" 26 years ago. Arya's breath caught. "That's before you were born." "I know." She set the photos down. "Then how is this my problem?" "Because you look exactly like her, and that's not a coincidence. People look like other people all the time. It doesn't mean—" "Elena Corso was involved with my father," Luca interrupted. "She worked for him, trusted him. And 3 months before she disappeared, my father was murdered." The room felt colder. Arya leaned back in her chair. "You think she killed him? I think she knew who did. And you think I'm connected to her? You are. You have to be. Based on what? A face?" Luca pulled out the chair across from her and sat down, leaning forward with his elbows on the table. "Elena had a daughter. No one knew about her. She kept it hidden. But right before she disappeared, she told someone she trusted that she was protecting her child, that she'd do anything to keep her safe." Arya's pulse kicked up. "And you think I'm that child?" "I think it's possible." "That's insane." "Is it?" He slid another photo across the table. This one showed Elena holding a baby. The image was blurry, taken from a distance, but the timestamp on the back read 26 years ago. Arya stared at it. "This doesn't prove anything." "Then prove me wrong. Tell me about your parents." "My father died 3 years ago. Heart attack." "And your mother?" Arya hesitated. "I never knew her. She left when I was a baby. My father raised me and Marcus on his own." "Did he ever talk about her?" "No. Never." "Did you ever see a photo? A name on a document? Anything?" "No. He just said she wasn't in the picture anymore, and we didn't need to ask about her." Luca leaned back. "Convenient. Or true. Or a lie." Arya's hands curled into fists on the table. "My father wasn't a liar. Everyone lies when they're protecting something." She stood up so fast the chair scraped against the floor. "I'm done with this." "Sit down." "No. You dragged me in here to play detective with a bunch of old photos and wild theories. I didn't ask for this. I didn't ask to look like some dead woman from your father's past. And I sure as hell didn't ask to be part of whatever vendetta you're chasing. Sit down." His voice came out low and dangerous, but Arya didn't move. "Make me." They stared at each other. The air between them felt charged, like one wrong word would set off an explosion. Then Luca stood too. He didn't touch her, didn't move closer, just stood there, jaw tight, eyes blazing with something between anger and desperation. "If you are Elena's daughter," he said quietly, "then you're connected to the people who killed my father, and those people are still out there, still dangerous. If they find out about you, if they realize you exist, they will come for you. Then let them." "You don't mean that." "Don't tell me what I mean. You're scared." "I'm angry." "You should be both." Arya grabbed the folder and shoved it back across the table. I don't care about your father. I don't care about Elena Corso. And I don't care about whatever conspiracy theory you've built in your head. I'm here because my brother sold me to you. That's it. That's the only reason. So stop trying to make me into something I'm not. She turned and headed for the door. Your father's name was Richard Voss, Luca said behind her. She stopped. But 27 years ago, before you were born, his name was Richard Marino. Arya's hand froze on the doorknob. He changed it, Luca continued. Legally. Erased his old identity. Started over in a different city with a baby and no record of where he came from. She turned around slowly. How do you know that? Because I've been looking into your family since the moment your brother showed up with his debts. And what I found didn't add up. Your father appeared out of nowhere, no work history before 26 years ago, no family records, no trail, just a man with a new name and a daughter. Arya's throat felt tight. That doesn't mean... It means he was hiding, and people don't hide unless they have a reason. She wanted to argue, wanted to call him a liar, but the pieces were starting to fit together in a way that made her stomach turn. Her father never talked about the past, never explained why they moved so often when she was little, never told her where she came from or why her mother wasn't around. She'd always assumed it was grief, that losing her mother had been too painful to talk about. But what if it was something else? I need to see my brother, Arya said. Luca shook his head. No, he might know something. He doesn't. How do you know? Because I already asked him. Arya's eyes widened. You talked to Marcus? 2 days ago. Brought him here. Asked him about your father, about your mother, about anything he remembered from before your father died. And he didn't know anything useful. Your father kept secrets from both of you. Arya sank back into the chair, her legs suddenly unsteady. What did Marcus say? That your father was paranoid, moved them around a lot when Marcus was younger, never let them get too comfortable anywhere, always looking over his shoulder. That doesn't mean... It means he was running from something, or someone. The room spun. Arya pressed her hands against the table, trying to ground herself. This couldn't be real. Her father had been a good man, quiet, kind. He'd worked hard, raised her and Marcus on his own, never caused trouble. But he'd also been secretive, distant, like he was always waiting for something bad to happen. I don't believe you, she said, but even to her own ears it sounded weak. Luca sat down again. I'm not asking you to believe me. I'm asking you to help me find the truth. Why? What does it matter now? Your father's been dead for 26 years. Elena's gone. My father's gone. What's the point of digging all this up? Because whoever killed my father is still out there, and they're still dangerous. Then go after them yourself. I have been, for years. But every lead goes cold. Every witness disappears. Every trail ends in nothing. He leaned forward. Until you. I'm not a lead. I'm just a person who happens to look like someone. You're more than that. You have to be. Arya met his eyes. For the first time since she'd met him, she saw past the cold exterior, past the control and the threats. He was desperate. Whatever happened to his father had shaped him, driven him, and now he thought she was the key to finally getting answers. I can't help you, she said quietly. I don't know anything. Then we'll figure it out together. I didn't agree to that. You didn't have a choice. She wanted to scream, wanted to flip the table and walk out and never look back. But she was trapped, locked in this house, married to this man, tied to a past she didn't understand. If I help you, she said slowly, what do I get? Luca's expression shifted. What do you want? Freedom. When this is over, when you get your answers, I walk away. No strings, no conditions. You tear up that contract and let me go. He was quiet for a long moment, then he nodded. Deal. You mean that? I keep my word. Arya didn't know if she believed him, but she also didn't have many options. Fine, she said. Where do we start? Luca pulled out his phone and scrolled through something. Then he set it on the table, showing her a scanned document. Elena worked at a gallery downtown, high-end art, mostly private sales. This is the last record of her employment before she disappeared. Arya leaned in to read it. Corso Gallery. That her family's business? Yes. Her father owned it. He's dead now. Heart attack 10 years ago. Anyone else? A younger brother, Marco Corso. He took over the gallery after their father died. You talked to him? Tried. He won't see me. Why not? Because he knows my name, knows what my family does, and he wants nothing to do with it. Arya looked up. But he might talk to me. Maybe. You want me to go there, ask questions? Yes. And you think he'll just open up to a stranger? Not a stranger, a woman who looks exactly like his missing sister. The implication hung in the air. Arya exhaled slowly. You want to use me as bait. I want to use you as leverage. There's a difference. Not much of one. If Marco sees you, he'll talk. He'll want to know who you are, where you came from, and that gives us an opening. What if he doesn't know anything? Then we move on to the next lead. And if he does, then we finally start getting answers. Arya leaned back, rubbing her temples. This was insane. All of it. But sitting in this house doing nothing felt worse. When? She asked. Tomorrow. I'll drive you there myself. And what do I say? Hi, I'm a dead woman's doppelganger. Got any secrets to share? Luca's mouth twitched, almost a smile. Something like that. She shook her head. This is a bad idea. Probably. But you're doing it anyway. Yes. Why? Because I've been chasing ghosts for 26 years, and you're the first real lead I've had. Arya stood. I need air. You can walk the grounds. Just don't leave the property. I know the rules. She left the room before he could say anything else. The guards at the end of the hall watched her go but didn't follow. Small mercies. She made her way outside, past the fountains and manicured lawns, until she found a stone bench near the edge of the property. The gate was visible from here, tall, iron, locked. A reminder that no matter how nice the grounds were, she was still a prisoner. She sat down and stared at the sky. Her father had lied to her, changed his name, hidden his past, raised her in secrecy like they were running from something, and maybe they had been. Maybe Elena Corso really was her mother. Maybe her father had taken her and disappeared to keep her safe. Maybe everything she thought she knew about her life was a lie. The thought made her chest tight. Footsteps crunched on gravel behind her. She didn't turn around. If you're here to give me another lecture, save it. Not a lecture, Mrs. Callahan's voice. Just checking on you. Arya glanced back. The older woman stood a few feet away, hands folded in front of her. I'm fine. You don't look fine. Well, I am. Mrs. Callahan hesitated, then sat down on the other end of the bench. For a moment, neither of them spoke. How long have you worked for him? Arya asked finally. 15 years. That's a long time. It is. You must know him pretty well. Better than most. Arya turned to look at her. Is he always like this? Like what? Obsessed, driven, like he's chasing something he'll never catch. Mrs. Callahan's expression softened. His father's death changed him. He was young when it happened, 12 years old, and he never got closure, never got justice. It's eaten at him ever since. So he spent his whole life looking for answers. Yes, and now he thinks I'm the key. Are you? Arya looked away. I don't know. Then maybe it's time to find out. The older woman stood and walked back toward the house, leaving Arya alone with her thoughts. She stayed outside until the sun started setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and red. Then she went back inside up to her room and sat on the edge of the bed. Tomorrow she'd walk into a gallery and face a man who might recognize her as his dead sister. She'd ask questions she didn't know how to phrase. She'd dig into a past that wasn't hers. And maybe, just maybe, she'd finally start getting answers. She didn't sleep much that night. When morning came, she dressed in the clothes Mrs. Callahan had left out. Slacks, a blouse, a jacket. Professional. Unassuming, like she was going to a job interview instead of a potential interrogation. Luca was waiting downstairs. Ready? He asked. No? Good. Neither am I. They got into the car. Same black sedan, same tinted windows. The driver pulled out of the driveway and headed toward the city. Arya watched the scenery change from estates to suburbs to downtown streets, crowded with people who had normal lives. People who didn't have to worry about dead women and old murders and fathers who changed their names. She envied them. The gallery was in the arts district, tucked between a coffee shop and a boutique. Clean white exterior, large windows displaying abstract paintings. A small sign above the door, Corso Gallery. Luca parked across the street. "I'll wait here," he said. "You go in. Ask for Marco. Tell him you're looking for information about a piece your father owned. Keep it vague. Let him bring up Elena. And if he doesn't, then you bring her up. Say you heard she worked there. See how he reacts." Arya unbuckled her seatbelt. "This feels like a trap." "It's a conversation." "Same thing." She got out before she could talk herself out of it. The gallery door chimed when she pushed it open. Inside, the space was bright and minimalist. White walls, polished floors. A few people wandered between the displays, studying the art with expressions that ranged from impressed to confused. A young woman stood behind a desk near the back. "Can I help you?" "I'm looking for Marco Corso. Do you have an appointment?" "No, but I think you'll want to see me." The woman looked skeptical. "Can I tell him what this is regarding?" Arya hesitated. "It's about Elena." The woman's expression shifted. "One moment." She disappeared through a door behind the desk. Arya waited, her heart pounding. A minute later, the door opened again and a man stepped out. He was in his 50s, maybe. Gray at the temples, thin frame, wire-rimmed glasses. He looked like someone who spent his life surrounded by art, refined, thoughtful, a little fragile. But when he saw Arya, he went completely still. The color drained from his face. "No," he whispered. Arya took a step forward. "Mr. Corso." "Who are you?" "My name is Arya Voss. I need to talk to you about your sister." "That's not possible. Please, I just have a few questions." He stared at her like she was a hallucination. Then he looked around the gallery, at the other customers, the assistant still hovering near the desk, and made a decision. "Come with me." He led her through the door and into a back office. Small, cluttered, paintings leaning against the walls, a desk covered in papers. He shut the door and locked it. Then he turned to face her and his hands were shaking. "How is this possible?" he asked. "I don't know." "You look exactly like her." "I know." "Who sent you?" "No one sent me. I came because I need to know the truth." "About what?" "About Elena. About what happened to her. About—" Arya took a breath. "About whether she might have been my mother." Marco sank into the chair behind his desk like his legs had given out. "This is insane." "I know how it sounds." "Do you?" "Because I buried my sister 26 years ago. Or at least, I buried the idea of her. And now you show up looking like her ghost and asking questions I can't answer." "Did she have a daughter?" He didn't answer right away. Then quietly, "I don't know." "But you suspected." "She was secretive at the end. Wouldn't tell me where she was going, who she was with. I thought maybe she was in trouble, but she swore she wasn't. And then she disappeared." "Yes." "Do you know why?" Marco looked up at her. "Because she knew too much. And the people she worked for didn't like loose ends." Arya's stomach dropped. She worked for the De Lorenzos. "Yes. And when things went wrong, she ran. But running doesn't save you from people like that." "You think they killed her?" "I think someone did." The room felt smaller. Arya sat down in the chair across from him. "I think she was my mother. I think my father took me and disappeared to protect me. And now I'm married to the son of the man she worked for." Marco's eyes widened. "Luca De Lorenzo?" "Yes." "You married him?" "I didn't have a choice." He laughed bitterly. "That family doesn't give people choices. They take what they want. He's looking for answers about his father's murder. He thinks Elena knew something. She did. But she's gone. And whatever she knew died with her." "Or didn't." Marco frowned. "What do you mean?" Arya leaned forward. "If she had a daughter, if I'm that daughter, then maybe she left something behind, something that could help." "Like what?" "I don't know. But if you know anything, anything at all, please tell me." He was quiet for a long time. Then he stood, walked over to a filing cabinet in the corner and pulled out a small box. He set it on the desk between them. After she disappeared, I found this in her apartment. I kept it. Didn't know what else to do with it. Arya opened the box. Inside was a journal, leather-bound, worn around the edges, and tucked into the front cover was a photo of a baby, the same photo Luca had shown her. Her hands trembled as she picked up the journal and opened it. The first page had a single line written in careful script. For my daughter, if she ever needs the truth. Arya looked up at Marco. Can I take this? He nodded. If you really are her daughter, then it's yours. She stood, clutching the journal to her chest. Thank you. Be careful, Marco said. Whatever's in there, it got my sister killed. Don't let it do the same to you. Arya left the gallery with the journal hidden inside her jacket and got back into the car. Luca looked at her. Well? She pulled out the journal and handed it to him. He stared at it, then at her. Where did you get this? Her brother. He's had it for 26 years. Luca opened it carefully, scanning the first few pages. His jaw tightened. This changes everything, he said. I know. He looked at her, and for the first time, something other than suspicion filled his eyes. Respect. We need to read this. All of it. Then let's go. The driver pulled back into traffic, and Arya leaned against the window, watching the city blur past. She'd spent her whole life thinking she knew who she was. Now she wasn't sure of anything, but she was going to find out. They spread the journal out on Luca's desk like it was evidence at a crime scene, which, in a way, it was. Arya stood on one side, Luca on the other, both of them staring down at pages filled with Elena's handwriting. The script was neat at first, then grew more hurried toward the end, like she'd been running out of time. Luca flipped through slowly, his jaw tight. She documented everything. What do you mean, everything? Meetings, names, dates, transactions my father handled. He looked up. She was keeping a record. Of what? His business. The people he worked with. The deals he made. Luca's finger traced down one page. She knew who was loyal and who wasn't. Arya leaned in closer. Does it say who killed him? Not directly, but look at this. He turned the journal so she could see. One entry, dated 3 months before Elena disappeared, had been underlined multiple times. Vincent De Lorenzo is making a deal with the Rossi family. Antonio doesn't know. V says it's insurance, says Antonio is getting reckless. I don't trust this. Something's wrong. Arya read it twice. Who's Vincent? My uncle, my father's younger brother. And Antonio? My father. She looked up. Your uncle was making deals behind your father's back? Apparently. Luca's expression was stone, and Elena knew about it. That's why she ran. She found out your uncle was planning something. Or she was part of it. Arya shook her head. If she was part of it, why would she write this down? Why keep evidence against herself? Maybe she was covering her tracks, making sure if things went wrong, she had proof she wasn't involved. Or maybe she was trying to protect someone. Luca looked at her. Like who? Like you. Arya pointed at another entry, this one from a week later. Look, she writes about a boy, says she worries what will happen to him if things fall apart. Luca read the passage, and something shifted in his face, not quite emotion, but close. The boy is smart, too smart. He watches everything. I think he knows something's wrong, even if he doesn't understand what yet. If Antonio dies, Vincent will take over, and Vincent won't protect the boy the way Antonio does. I need to make sure there's a record, something that can help him later if he needs it. She was talking about you, Arya said quietly. Luca didn't respond. He just turned the page. The next entries were darker. Elena wrote about threats, about men showing up at the gallery asking questions, about feeling like she was being followed. Then, 2 weeks before she disappeared, the tone changed completely. I found out what Vincent is planning. It's worse than I thought. He's not just cutting deals. He's making a move. He wants Antonio gone. Permanently. And the Rossis are helping him. I confronted Vincent yesterday. Told him I knew. Big mistake. He didn't threaten me directly, but the message was clear. If I talk, I'm dead. If I stay quiet, I'm complicit. I can't do either, so I'm running. I have to. There's a child now. My daughter. I can't let her grow up in this world. Richard promised he'd take her somewhere safe. Change his name. Start over. I won't see her again. But at least she'll be alive. Arya's hands were shaking. She read the words again, trying to process them. Her father, Richard, had been involved with Elena, had promised to take her daughter and disappear, had taken Arya. She gave you up to save you, Luca said, his voice rough. Arya couldn't speak. Her throat felt too tight. She knew what was coming, Luca continued. Knew Vincent was going to kill my father, knew she couldn't stop it, so she made sure you got out. And then what? Arya's voice cracked. She just vanished? Let everyone think she was dead? Maybe she didn't have a choice. There's always a choice. Not when people like Vincent are involved. Arya turned away from the desk, pressing her palms against her eyes. This was too much, too fast. Her entire life had been a lie, and now she was standing in the house of the man whose family had destroyed hers. Except it wasn't that simple, because Luca had been a victim too. A 12-year-old boy who lost his father and spent the next 26 years searching for answers. What happened to Vincent? She asked without turning around. He ran the family for 10 years after my father died. Then he had a heart attack, died in his sleep. Convenient. Very. She turned back. You think someone killed him? I know someone did. How? Because I was the one who arranged it. The room went silent. Arya stared at him. What? Luca's expression didn't change. I was 22. I'd just taken over the family business, started digging into my father's death, found enough evidence to know Vincent was involved. So I handled it. You killed your own uncle. I had someone else do it, but yes. And you're just telling me this? You wanted the truth. That's the truth. Arya didn't know what to say. Part of her was horrified. The other part, the part that had spent the last week locked in this house, treated like property, understood. Luca lived in a world where justice didn't come from courts or laws. It came from blood. Did it help? She asked. Killing him? No. Then why do it? Because he deserved it, and because I thought it would give me closure. Luca walked over to the window, hands in his pockets. It didn't. Just made the questions louder. Questions like what? Like whether Vincent acted alone, whether the Rossis were really involved, whether Elena survived or if they found her too. He turned back to face her, and now I know she had a daughter, which means there's a whole other layer to this I never saw coming. Arya crossed her arms. So what now? You've got the journal. You've got answers. What are you going to do with them? Find out who else was involved and make sure they pay. That's it? Just revenge? What else is there? I don't know. Maybe letting it go, maybe moving on. Luca laughed, but there was no humor in it. You don't move on from something like this. You carry it every day until you either fix it or it destroys you. And which one are you? He didn't answer. Arya walked over to the desk and picked up the journal. I want to keep reading this. Fine, but not alone. We do it together. Why? Because if there are more names in here, more people involved, I need to know. And you might recognize something I don't. She wanted to argue, wanted to take the journal and lock herself in her room and read it cover to cover without him hovering. But he was right. If Elena's words held the key to everything, they needed to go through it carefully. Fine, she said, but I have conditions. Of course you do. First, no more locking my door at night. If we're working together, I'm not a prisoner anymore. Luca considered it. Agreed. Second, I want access to everything. Files, records, whatever you've been keeping about your father's murder. No more secrets. That's not how this works. Then we're done here. He exhaled slowly. Fine. You get access, but you don't touch anything without me knowing. Deal. And third, there's a third? When this is over, you let me go. No arguments, no extensions. The contract gets torn up and I walk away clean. Luca stared at her for a long moment. Then he nodded. Agreed. Arya didn't entirely trust him, but it was the best she was going to get. They spent the rest of the afternoon going through the journal page by page. Elena had been meticulous. Every entry was dated. Every name was spelled out. Every meeting was documented with locations and times. She'd built a case without meaning to. By the time the sun started setting, they'd made a list of names. Most of them were people Arya didn't recognize. But two stood out: Vincent De Lorenzo, dead, and Salvatore Rossi, very much alive. He was the head of the Rossi family back then, Luca said, pointing at the name. Still is. Runs half the city now. You think he was involved in your father's murder? I know he was. Elena's notes make it clear. Vincent couldn't have pulled it off alone. He needed muscle. The Rossis provided it. So why haven't you gone after him? Because going after Salvatore Rossi isn't like going after my uncle. Rossi has an army, connections, politicians on his payroll. You don't just walk up and put a bullet in him. But you want to. Every day. Arya leaned back in her chair. What if we can prove it? What if there's enough in here to build a real case? Luca shook his head. This isn't a courtroom problem. This is a street problem. So you're just going to kill him? If I get the chance? Yes. And what happens to you when you do? I don't care. You should. Why? Because revenge isn't the same as justice. And if you go down this path, you're going to end up just like the people who killed your father. Luca stood abruptly. You don't know what you're talking about, don't I? You've spent your whole life chasing ghosts, and now that you're close, you can't even see that it's not going to fix anything. It'll fix enough. No, it won't. You'll kill Rossi, and then what? Someone else takes over. The cycle continues. Nothing changes. Then what do you suggest? Arya stood too, meeting his eyes. I suggest we find out the whole truth first. Not just who killed your father, but why. What they were after. What they gained. Because if we don't understand the full picture, we'll never really be free of this. Luca's jaw worked. You sound like her. Like who? Elena. She used to say things like that. Used to tell my father that revenge was a trap. She was right. And look where it got her. Arya didn't have an answer for that. The room fell into silence. Outside, the last rays of sunlight disappeared behind the trees, leaving the office bathed in shadow. Finally, Luca spoke. We'll keep reading, see if there's anything else in there that helps. But after that, I'm done waiting. Waiting for what? For the right moment, for proof, for permission. He looked at her. I'm going after Rossi, and you can't stop me. I'm not trying to stop you. I'm trying to save you. I don't need saving. Everyone needs saving. He didn't respond, just turned and walked out of the office, leaving her alone with the journal. Arya sat back down and opened it again, flipping through the pages she'd already read. Elena's voice came through clearly in the writing, intelligent, cautious, scared. She'd been trying to protect people, trying to do the right thing, and it had cost her everything. Arya wondered if her mother had regretted it, regretted giving her up, regretted getting involved with the De Lorenzos in the first place, or if she'd made peace with it somehow. She kept reading. The later entries grew more frantic. Elena wrote about nightmares, about feeling watched, about a phone call where someone told her to keep her mouth shut or face consequences. Then, 5 days before she disappeared, there was an entry that made Arya's blood run cold. They found out about the baby. I don't know how, but they know. Richard says we have to move now. Tonight. He's arranged everything. New names, new city. I'll never see her again, but she'll be safe. That's all that matters. If anyone reads this, if my daughter ever finds this, I want her to know I loved her. I loved her more than anything, and I'm sorry I couldn't stay. Arya's vision blurred. She set the journal down and pressed her hands against her face, trying to hold herself together. But the tears came anyway, hot and angry and full of grief for a woman she'd never known. Her mother had loved her, had given up everything to keep her safe, and Arya hadn't even known she existed. Footsteps sounded in the hallway, and then Mrs. Callahan appeared in the doorway. Dinner's ready, the older woman said. Then she saw Arya's face. Oh dear. I'm fine. You're not. Come on. Let's get you something to eat. I'm not hungry. You need to eat anyway. Arya wiped her eyes and stood. Is he down there? Mr. De Lorenzo? No, he left an hour ago. Said he had business to handle. Of course he did. Mrs. Callahan led her downstairs to the dining room, where a single place setting waited. Arya sat down, and the housekeeper brought out a plate of food that she barely looked at. "You read the journal," Mrs. Callahan said. It wasn't a question. "Yes. And?" "And my whole life is a lie." The older woman sat down across from her. "Not a lie. A protection." "Same thing." "No. A lie is meant to deceive. A protection is meant to save. Your father did what he had to do. He took me and ran, never told me the truth. Let me think my mother just abandoned us. Because the truth would have put you in danger." Arya looked up. "How do you know that?" Mrs. Callahan hesitated. "Because I knew her. Elena." The room tilted. "What?" "I worked for the De Lorenzo family back then. I was younger, just a maid. But I saw her come and go. Saw how she looked at Antonio, how careful she was." Mrs. Callahan's expression softened. "And I saw how scared she was at the end." "You knew she had a daughter." "I suspected. She started wearing looser clothes, stopped coming to the house as often. Then one day she was just gone and no one talked about her again." "Did you know my father, Richard?" "No, but I heard the name once. Antonio mentioned him, said he was someone Elena trusted." Arya's hands curled into fists on the table. "Why didn't you say anything before?" "Because it wasn't my place, and because I didn't know for sure until I saw you." Mrs. Callahan reached across the table and touched Arya's hand gently. "You look just like her. The moment you walked through that door, I knew." "Does Luca know you knew her?" "Probably. He knows everything." "Then why didn't he tell me you could help?" "Because he's too focused on revenge to see anything else. He's been that way since he was a boy. Single-minded, stubborn." She pulled her hand back. "But he's not a bad man. Just a broken one." Arya pushed her plate away. "I don't know how to help him." "Maybe you're not supposed to help him. Maybe you're supposed to help yourself." "By doing what?" "By deciding who you want to be. You're not just Elena's daughter. You're not just Richard's daughter. You're Arya, and you get to choose what happens next." The word settled over her like a weight. Mrs. Callahan stood. "Eat, then get some rest. Tomorrow's going to be hard." "Why?" "Because Mr. De Lorenzo is going to do something reckless. He always does when he gets close to answers." She left before Arya could ask what she meant. Arya sat alone in the dining room staring at her untouched food. Her mind raced through everything she'd learned. Her mother, her father, the conspiracy, the murder. And Luca, standing at the center of it all, ready to burn everything down for the sake of closure. She had to stop him, or at least try. She got up and went looking for him. Checked his office first. Empty. Then the library, the sitting rooms, the back hallways. Finally, she found him in the garage. He was standing next to a black SUV, loading a gun. "What are you doing?" Arya asked from the doorway. He didn't look up. "What does it look like?" "It looks like you're about to do something stupid." "Close. I'm about to do something necessary." "You're going after Rossi." "Yes." "Tonight?" "Yes." Arya walked over and grabbed his arm. "You can't. Not like this." "Let go." "No. Not until you listen to me." He finally looked at her and his eyes were cold. Flat. The same look he'd had at the altar when they got married. "This doesn't concern you," he said. "The hell it doesn't. If you go after him now, you'll get yourself killed. And then what? I'm stuck here. Your family falls apart, and Rossi wins anyway. I'm not going to get killed." "You don't know that." "I've been planning this for years. I know exactly what I'm doing." "Then why now? Why tonight?" "Because I'm done waiting." He pulled his arm free and slid the gun into a holster under his jacket. "Elena's journal gave me everything I need. Names, locations, proof. I'm not letting him walk away from this." "So you're just going to show up and shoot him?" "Something like that." "That's not a plan. That's suicide." "Then stay here and stay safe." He moved toward the driver's side door, but Arya stepped in front of him. "Move," he said. "No." "Arya, if you're going, I'm going with you." He stared at her like she'd lost her mind. "Absolutely not. You don't get to decide that." "Yes, I do. You're my wife. You stay here where it's safe." "I'm not your wife. I'm your prisoner. And if you think I'm going to sit in this house while you go get yourself killed, you're wrong. This isn't a negotiation. You're right, it's not. She crossed her arms. Either I come with you, or I call Rossi myself and warn him you're coming. Luca's expression darkened. You wouldn't. Try me. They stood there, locked in another standoff. The air between them crackled with tension. Finally, Luca exhaled sharply. Fine. Get in. But you stay in the car. You don't move. You don't speak. You don't do anything except sit there and wait for me. Understood? Understood. She got into the passenger seat before he could change his mind. Luca climbed in beside her, started the engine, and pulled out of the garage without another word. The drive took 20 minutes. They left the estate, wound through quiet suburban streets, and eventually ended up in the industrial district. Warehouses and shipping containers and buildings that looked abandoned. Luca parked behind one of the warehouses and killed the engine. Stay here, he said. I know. He checked his gun one more time, then got out. Arya watched him disappear around the corner of the building. Her heart pounded so hard she could hear it in her ears. This was insane. She should have stayed at the house. Should have let him go alone. Should have done anything except get into this car. But she couldn't let him do this by himself. Because despite everything, despite the threats and the control and the cold exterior, she didn't want him to die. Minutes passed. Then she heard voices, shouting, a gunshot. Arya's breath caught. She waited, frozen, staring at the corner where Luca had disappeared. Another shot. Then silence. She couldn't stand it anymore. She got out of the car and ran toward the building, her heart in her throat. She rounded the corner and saw a side door hanging open. Light spilled out from inside. She stepped through. The warehouse was massive, rows of crates, dim overhead lights, and in the center, Luca stood facing 3 men. One of them was on the ground, bleeding. The other 2 had guns pointed at Luca. And standing behind them, calm as anything, was an older man in an expensive suit, Salvatore Rossi. You're making a mistake, boy, Rossi said. Luca's gun was steady. The only mistake I made was waiting this long. You think killing me changes anything? You think it brings your father back? No, but it evens the score, Rossi laughed. There is no score. Your father was weak. He got what was coming. Luca's finger moved toward the trigger. Stop, Arya shouted. Everyone turned. Luca's eyes widened. What are you doing? Stopping you from making the biggest mistake of your life. Rossi's gaze landed on her and his expression shifted. Confusion, then recognition. Impossible, he whispered. Arya stepped forward. You knew her. Elena Corso. You knew what happened to her. Rossi's face went pale. Who are you? I'm her daughter. The warehouse went silent. One of Rossi's men shifted, gun still trained on Luca, but his attention was divided now. That's not possible, Rossi said. She didn't. She did. And my father took me and disappeared before you could find us. Arya's voice shook, but she kept going. You killed Luca's father. You helped Vincent De Lorenzo stage a coup. And when Elena found out, you tried to kill her too. I didn't. Don't lie. I read her journal. I know everything. Rossi's jaw tightened. Then you know she was a liability. She knew too much. She was going to talk. So you killed her. I didn't kill anyone. Vincent handled it. Convenient. Vincent's dead. Can't confirm or deny. Believe what you want. Doesn't change the facts. Luca's gun was still pointed at Rossi. This conversation is over. Wait, Arya said. Just wait. Why? Because killing him doesn't give us the full truth. We need to know what happened to Elena, where she is, whether she's still alive. Rossi laughed bitterly. You think I know that? I think you know more than you're saying. She's dead. Has been for 26 years. Vincent made sure of it. How? Does it matter? Yes. Rossi sighed. Fine. You want the truth? Vincent sent men after her, tracked her to some little town upstate. But by the time they got there, she was already gone. Just vanished. We assumed she died somewhere and no one found the body. Or she survived. If she survived, we'd have heard about it by now. Arya's chest tightened. So you're saying she's dead? I'm saying I don't know, and frankly, I don't care. Rossi looked at Luca. You want to shoot me? Go ahead. But it won't bring her back. Won't bring your father back. Won't change anything. Luca's hand shook, just slightly, but enough that Arya saw it. Don't, she said quietly. Please. He deserves it. Maybe, but you don't deserve what comes after. Luca's eyes flicked to her. What's that supposed to mean? It means if you pull that trigger, you become him. You become everything you've been fighting against. I don't care. Yes, you do. They stared at each other across the warehouse. Finally, Luca lowered the gun. Get out, he said to Rossi, before I change my mind. Rossi didn't need to be told twice. He gestured to his men, and they backed toward the exit, guns still raised until they were outside. Then they were gone. The warehouse fell silent. Luca stood there, breathing hard, the gun still in his hand. Arya walked over to him. You did the right thing. Did I? Yes. Doesn't feel like it. It never does. He looked at her, and for the first time the mask cracked completely. She saw the exhaustion, the pain, the years of carrying a weight no one should have to carry. I don't know what to do now, he said quietly. Neither do I, but we'll figure it out. Together? Yeah, together. He nodded slowly. Then he holstered the gun and walked toward the exit. Arya followed. They got back into the car and drove home in silence. But something had shifted. The walls between them weren't gone, but they were starting to crack. The house felt different when they got back. Arya couldn't explain it. Same marble floors, same towering ceilings, same portraits of stern-faced men lining the walls. But something had shifted, like the air itself had changed weight. Luca went straight to his office without a word. Arya watched him disappear down the hallway, then stood in the foyer trying to figure out what she was supposed to do now. Go to her room? Follow him? Pretend tonight hadn't happened? She chose the last option by default and headed upstairs. But when she reached her door, she noticed something. The lock was gone. Not just unlocked, completely removed. Fresh paint covered the holes where the mechanism had been. Mrs. Callahan's doing, probably. Arya went inside and sat on the edge of the bed, still wearing the jacket she'd thrown on before chasing Luca into what could have been a massacre. Her hands were shaking now that the adrenaline was wearing off. She pressed them flat against her thighs and tried to breathe normally. She'd almost watched Luca die tonight. Or worse, she'd almost watched him become a murderer. The distinction felt important somehow. A knock sounded at the door. Come in, she said. Mrs. Callahan stepped inside, carrying a tray with tea and something that looked like soup. Thought you might need this. I'm not hungry. You never are. But you're eating anyway. The housekeeper set the tray on the small table by the window. Mr. De Lorenzo told me what happened. Did he? Some of it. Enough to know you stopped him from doing something he'd regret. Arya looked up. He doesn't seem like the type to regret things. He's exactly the type. He just hides it better than most. Mrs. Callahan gestured at the tray. Eat, then sleep. You've had a long night. What about him? What about him? Is he okay? The older woman's expression softened. I don't think he's been okay in a very long time, but maybe now he has a chance to be. She left before Arya could ask what that meant. Arya stared at the tray for a while, then gave in and tried the soup. It was good. Too good. The kind of thing that made her realize she hadn't eaten properly in days. She finished the bowl, drank the tea, and lay down on top of the covers without bothering to change. Sleep felt impossible. Her mind kept replaying the warehouse, the guns, Rossi's face when he saw her, the way Luca's hand had shaken before he lowered the weapon. She'd saved his life tonight, or maybe he'd saved his own. Either way, something had broken open between them. Some wall that had been there since the moment he lifted her veil and saw a ghost staring back. She didn't know what came next, but she knew they couldn't keep going the way they had been. Sleep came eventually, restless and full of dreams she couldn't quite remember when morning arrived. She woke to voices downstairs, loud ones. Arya got up, splashed water on her face, and headed toward the commotion. It was coming from Luca's office. The door was open and she could hear him arguing with someone. You can't be serious, a man's voice said, not one she recognized. I'm completely serious. Luca's voice, calm, cold. This is suicide. Rossi's going to retaliate. You humiliated him. Let him try. He will, and when he does, you'll have a war on your hands. Then we'll fight. Arya reached the doorway and stopped. Inside, Lucas stood behind his desk, facing three men in suits. They all looked tense, scared even. One of them noticed her. "Who's that?" Luca glanced over. "My wife." "Since when do you have a wife?" "Since 2 weeks ago. Now get back to the point." The man who'd been arguing stepped forward. "The point is you walked into Rossi's warehouse, threatened him, and then walked out again without finishing it. That's not strength. That's weakness. And people are going to see it that way." "I don't care what people see." "You should. You run this family. If they think you're soft, I'm not soft. I'm strategic." "There's nothing strategic about letting Rossi live. There is if killing him starts a war we can't win." The man opened his mouth to argue, then seemed to think better of it. "Fine, but when this blows up in your face, don't say I didn't warn you." He and the other two left, brushing past Arya without acknowledging her. She stepped into the office. "Friends of yours?" "Business associates. They seem pleasant." "They're useful. That's all that matters." Lucas sat down and rubbed his temples. "What do you want?" "To check on you." "I'm fine." "You don't look fine." "Well, I am." Arya crossed her arms. "Your guys are right, you know. Rossi's not going to let this go." "I know." "So what's the plan?" "There isn't one yet." "That's reassuring." He looked up at her. "What do you want me to say? That I have all the answers? That I know exactly how to handle this? I don't. I made a choice last night, and now I have to deal with the consequences." "We made a choice." "No, I made it. You just happened to be there." "I was there because I stopped you from killing him." "And maybe that was a mistake." Arya walked over and leaned against the desk. "Do you really believe that?" Luca didn't answer right away. He just stared at his hands like they held secrets he couldn't quite read. "I wanted to pull the trigger," he said finally. "I wanted it so badly I could taste it. But when you told me not to, when you said I'd become him if I did, I realized you were right, and I hated you for it." "Do you still hate me?" "No." "Then what?" He looked up at her and his eyes were different, less guarded. "I don't know." The honesty caught her off guard. She'd expected walls, expected deflection, but instead he was just there, present, real. "We need to figure out what happens next," she said quietly. "I know. And we need to do it together." "Why?" "Because you can't do this alone anymore. And neither can I." Luca stood, and suddenly they were close enough that she could see the faint scar above his eyebrow again. The one she'd noticed their first night in the dining room. "You're not what I expected," he said. "You've mentioned that before." "I mean it. When your brother brought you to me, I thought you'd be easy to control. Quiet. Obedient. Someone I could ignore. Sorry to disappoint." "You didn't disappoint. You complicated everything." "Good." His mouth almost twitched into a smile. "Almost." Then his phone rang. He pulled it out, glanced at the screen, and his expression hardened. "I need to take this." "Who is it?" "Doesn't matter. Go. I'll find you later." Arya wanted to argue, but the look on his face told her this wasn't the time. She left the office and wandered back toward the library. It had become her default sanctuary in this house, a place where she could think without feeling like she was being watched. She was halfway through the second shelf when she heard footsteps behind her. Not Mrs. Callahan's soft padding, something heavier. She turned. A man stood in the doorway, tall, broad-shouldered, expensive suit. He looked like he belonged here, which meant he was probably dangerous. "You must be Arya," he said. "Who are you?" "Marco, Luca's cousin." She relaxed slightly. "Family, then. Or at least blood." "He didn't mention you." "He wouldn't. We don't exactly get along." Marco walked into the library and looked around like he owned the place. "Nice setup. You read all these?" "Working on it." "Luca says you look like Elena Corso." Arya stiffened. "He told you that?" "He tells me everything, eventually." Marco turned to face her. "I knew Elena. Not well, but enough to remember her face. And he's right. You could be her twin." "I'm her daughter." "Yeah, I figured. Which makes this whole situation even messier than it already was." "What situation?" "The one where my cousin married a woman connected to the people who killed his father, and then decided not to kill the guy responsible." Marco shook his head. Luca's losing his edge, or maybe he's finding it. That's an optimistic take. Arya crossed her arms. Why are you here? To warn you. About what? Rossi. He's not going to let last night slide. And when he makes his move, you're going to be a target. Because I look like Elena. Because you stopped Luca from finishing the job. Rossi sees that as weakness, and weakness gets exploited. So what am I supposed to do? Stay close to Luca. Don't go anywhere without security. And if things get bad, run. I'm not running. Marco studied her. You're stubborn. I like that. But stubbornness gets people killed in this world. Then I guess I'll have to be smarter than stubborn. He laughed. Yeah, you'll fit in just fine. He started to leave, then paused at the door. For what it's worth, I'm glad he didn't kill Rossi. Luca's been chasing that ghost for so long, I was starting to think he'd forgotten how to be anything else. And now? Now maybe he has a reason to remember. Marco left, and Arya stood there trying to process the conversation. Everyone in this house seemed to think she was some kind of turning point for Luca, some catalyst that would either save him or destroy him. She wasn't sure which one scared her more. The rest of the day passed slowly. Luca stayed locked in his office, fielding calls and meetings. Arya spent most of her time in the library, reading Elena's journal over and over, looking for details she might have missed. One entry kept catching her attention. It was from the week before Elena disappeared. Short, almost cryptic. If something happens to me, Richard knows where to look. He'll keep her safe. He promised, and Richard always keeps his promises. Arya stared at the words. Her father had promised to keep her safe, and he had. For 26 years he'd hidden her, raised her, loved her, but he'd also lied. She didn't know how to reconcile those two truths. Evening came and Mrs. Callahan appeared with dinner. Mr. De Lorenzo wants you to eat with him tonight. In the dining room? His office. Arya followed her downstairs. Luca's office door was open, and inside he sat at his desk with 2 plates of food laid out. He gestured to the chair across from him. Sit. She sat. For a while they ate in silence. The food was good. Steak, roasted vegetables, bread. But Arya barely tasted it. I talked to Marco, she said finally. Luca looked up. What did he say? That Rossi's going to come after me. He's right. And you're okay with that? No? Which is why I'm putting security on you. Security. 2 men. Wherever you go, they go. I'm not leaving the house. You will eventually, and when you do, they'll be with you. Arya set down her fork. I don't want guards following me around. I don't care what you want. I care about keeping you alive. Why? The question hung between them. Luca set down his own fork. Because you're my wife. That's not a real answer. It's the only one you're getting. She leaned back. You know what I think? I'm sure you'll tell me. I think you care because you see her when you look at me, Elena. And you couldn't save her, so now you're trying to save me to make up for it. Luca's jaw tightened. You don't know what you're talking about. Don't I? Elena wasn't mine to save. I was 12 years old. I couldn't have done anything even if I'd tried. But you blame yourself anyway. I blame the people who killed her, and my father, and myself for not being strong enough to stop any of it. His voice cracked just slightly on the last word. Arya softened. You were a kid. That's not an excuse. It's a fact. He stood abruptly and walked over to the window. When my father died, I promised myself I'd find out who did it, that I'd make them pay, that I'd never let anyone hurt my family again. And I've spent the last 26 years keeping that promise. But every time I get close, something goes wrong. Someone disappears. Evidence vanishes. And I'm left with nothing. You're not left with nothing. You have the journal. You have answers. Answers aren't justice. No, but they're a start. He turned to look at her. What do you want from me, Arya? I want you to stop treating this like a war you have to win alone. I'm not alone. I have men, resources, power. That's not what I mean. Then what? I mean you have me, and I'm not going anywhere. Luca stared at her like he was trying to figure out if she meant it. Why? He asked quietly. Because I'm stuck in this just as much as you are. Because my mother died for this. Because my father spent his whole life running from it. And because if we don't figure this out together, it's going to destroy both of us." He was quiet for a long time. Then he walked back over and sat down. "Okay. Okay? Okay. We do this together." Arya exhaled slowly. "Good." They finished dinner in silence, but it wasn't the tense, hostile silence from before. It was something else, something that felt almost like understanding. When they were done, Luca stood. "I have more work to do. You should get some rest." "What kind of work?" "The kind that keeps us alive." She wanted to push, but she could see the exhaustion in his face. Whatever he was dealing with, it was taking a toll. "Fine," she said, "but tomorrow, we sit down and make a real plan. No more solo missions, no more secrets." Agreed. She left the office and headed upstairs. Her room felt emptier than usual, bigger, like the walls had stretched while she was gone. She changed into something comfortable and climbed into bed, but sleep didn't come easy. Her mind kept turning over the day. The argument with Luca's men, Marco's warning, the journal entries she'd read a dozen times, and underneath it all, one question kept surfacing. What happened to Elena? Rossi said she was dead, but he also said they never found a body, which meant there was a chance, however small, that she'd survived, that Arya's mother was still out there somewhere. The thought made her chest ache. She rolled over and stared at the ceiling, trying to imagine what Elena looked like, whether she'd aged the way Arya had imagined, whether she ever thought about the daughter she'd given up, whether she regretted it. Morning came too fast. Arya woke to pounding on her door. Not a polite knock, actual pounding. She stumbled out of bed and pulled the door open. One of Luca's men stood there, face pale. "What's wrong? You need to come downstairs, now!" Her stomach dropped. "Why? What happened?" "Just come." She threw on a robe and followed him down. The house was in chaos. Men moving quickly through the hallways, phones ringing, voices raised. They reached Luca's office, and she pushed inside. Luca stood behind his desk, staring at something on his phone. His face was carved from stone. "What's going on?" Arya asked. He looked up at her, and his eyes were dark. Rossi made his move. "What kind of move?" "The kind that starts a war." He turned his phone so she could see the screen. It was a photo, grainy, taken from a distance, but clear enough to recognize. It showed a woman, middle-aged, dark hair streaked with gray, standing in front of a small house somewhere rural. She looked exactly like the woman from the journal photos. Exactly like Arya. "That's her," Arya whispered. "That's Elena." Luca's voice was tight. "Rossi sent this an hour ago, with a message." "What message?" He showed her the text below the photo. "You want answers? Come get them, alone, or I kill her." Arya's blood went cold. "He found her," she said. "Yes." "And now he's using her to get to you." "Yes." She looked up at him. "What are you going to do?" Luca set the phone down. His expression was unreadable. "I'm going to get her back. And if it's a trap?" "It's definitely a trap. Then you can't go." "I don't have a choice." "Yes, you do. We call the police. The police can't help with this. You know that." She did. But that didn't make it easier. "Then I'm coming with you," she said. "Absolutely not. You don't get to decide that." "Yes, I do. Rossi wants me. Not you. If you show up, it complicates everything." "Good. Maybe complications are what we need." Luca walked around the desk and stood in front of her. "Listen to me. If something happens, if this goes wrong, I need to know you're safe. That's the only way I can do this." "And what about me? What if something happens to you?" "Then you walk away. You take the journal, you disappear, and you live the life your mother wanted for you." Arya's throat tightened. "I don't want that life without answers." "Then I'll make sure you get them." He turned and headed for the door. "Luca, wait." But he was already gone. Arya stood there, frozen, as the reality sank in. He was going to trade himself for Elena, and there was nothing she could do to stop him. Arya wasn't about to let him walk into a death trap alone. She gave him a 10-minute head start, then grabbed her jacket and headed for the garage. Two of Luca's men tried to stop her at the door. "Mrs. De Lorenzo, you need to stay inside. Move." Boss's orders. I don't care about his orders. Move or I'll move you myself. They exchanged glances, clearly weighing whether physically restraining the boss's wife was worth the potential consequences. Arya didn't give them time to decide. She pushed past them and headed for the garage. Marco was there, leaning against a car, arms crossed. I was wondering how long it would take you, he said. You knew I'd follow him? You've got that look. Same one Elena had, stubborn to the point of stupid. He pushed off the car and tossed her a set of keys. Take the sedan. It's got GPS. I already pulled up the location Rossi sent. Arya caught the keys. Why are you helping me? Because Luca's going to get himself killed trying to be a hero, and someone needs to be there to drag his ass out when it all goes sideways. You're not coming? Can't. If Rossi sees me, he'll know it's not just Luca showing up alone. But you. You're family now. And family looks out for each other even when they're being idiots. Arya got into the car. The GPS was already loaded with an address 2 hours north. Rural area. Middle of nowhere. Perfect place for an ambush. She pulled out of the garage and drove. The city gave way to suburbs, then to farmland and forest. The roads got narrower. The houses spread farther apart. By the time she reached the address, the sun was starting to set, painting the sky in shades of blood orange. The location was a farmhouse at the end of a gravel road. Old. Isolated. A single light burned in one of the windows. Arya parked a quarter-mile back and approached on foot, staying in the tree line. Her heart hammered against her ribs. This was insane. She had no weapons, no backup, no plan beyond, don't let Luca die. But she kept moving. She circled around to the back of the house and found a window. Inside, she could see a large room, probably used to be a living room, with furniture pushed against the walls. 3 men stood near the door, and in the center, tied to a chair, was a woman. Elena. Even from a distance, even after 26 years, Arya recognized her. The resemblance was impossible to deny. Same bone structure, same eyes. Just older. Worn down by time and fear. Her mother. Arya's chest tightened so hard she couldn't breathe. Then the front door opened and Luca walked in. No gun visible. Hands at his sides. He moved like a man who'd accepted whatever was coming. Rossi stepped out from a side room, flanked by 2 more men. He smiled. You came. You didn't leave me much choice. No, I suppose I didn't. Rossi gestured at Elena. Do you recognize her? Luca's gaze shifted to the woman in the chair. His face betrayed nothing, but Arya saw his hands curl into fists. Elena Corso, he said quietly. The very same. Alive and well. Or alive, at least. Rossi walked over and grabbed Elena's chin, forcing her to look up. She's been hiding in this little town for 26 years. New name, new life. Thought she was safe. Elena's eyes were red, swollen, but there was still fire in them. Let her go, Luca said. Why would I do that? She's the only leverage I have. You have me. That's what you wanted, right? Me here, alone. So let her go. Rossi laughed. You think this is about you? This is about finishing what Vincent started. He wanted Elena dead because she knew too much. And now, all these years later, I get to finish the job. Vincent's dead, his vendetta died with him. No, it didn't, because you've been poking around, asking questions, threatening my business. I let it slide for years because you were too young to be a real problem. But now? Rossi pulled out a gun. Now you're a liability, and liabilities get eliminated. Luca didn't flinch. Then shoot me. But let her walk. Touching, but no. He aimed the gun at Elena. Arya didn't think. She just moved. She kicked in the back door and stepped into the room, hands raised. Stop! Everyone turned. Rossi's eyes widened. What the? Let them both go, Arya said, her voice shaking but steady. You want leverage? You've got it. I'm Elena's daughter, which means I'm worth more to you alive than dead. Arya, get out of here, Luca said through gritted teeth. No. Rossi lowered the gun slightly, studying her. You're the girl from the warehouse. Yes. And you're really her daughter. Yes. He looked between Arya and Elena, then started laughing. This is perfect. The whole family, together at last. Too bad it ends here. It doesn't have to, Arya said. You want us gone? Fine, we disappear, all three of us. You never hear from us again. And I'm supposed to trust that? What choice do you have? You kill us, and Luca's people will come after you. They'll tear this city apart until they find you, but if we walk away, if we're no longer a problem, you get what you want without starting a war. Rossi considered this. She makes a good point. One of his men stepped forward. Boss, we can't just... Shut up. I'm thinking. Arya took a step closer. Let Elena go. Let Luca go. And I'll stay. You can use me as insurance. If they come back, you kill me. But if they don't, everyone walks away clean. Arya, no, Luca said. It's the only way. Elena spoke for the first time, her voice hoarse. Don't do this. Don't trade yourself for me. I'm not trading. I'm negotiating. Rossi walked over to Arya, the gun still in his hand. He stopped close enough that she could see the calculation in his eyes. He was weighing options, risks, outcomes. Then he smiled. Okay. Okay? I'll take the deal, with one condition. What condition? You prove you're really her daughter, because if you're lying, if this is some kind of trick, I kill all three of you right now. Arya's mind raced. How am I supposed to prove that? Easy. Rossi walked over to Elena and cut the ropes binding her hands. Then he shoved her forward. Ask her. Elena stumbled, caught herself, and looked up at Arya. Their eyes met. And in that moment, Arya saw everything, the fear, the regret, the love buried under 26 years of separation. Mom? Arya's voice cracked. Elena's face crumpled. Oh my God. Arya. She crossed the room in 3 steps and pulled Arya into a hug so tight it hurt. Arya felt her mother's shoulders shake with sobs, felt her own tears start to fall. I'm sorry, Elena whispered. I'm so sorry. I wanted to keep you safe. I thought if I disappeared, they'd never find you. You did keep me safe. Dad kept me safe. Richard, he died 3 years ago. Elena pulled back, grief written across her face. He was a good man, better than I deserved. He loved you, even after everything. I know. Rossi cleared his throat. Touching reunion, but we're not done here. Arya turned to face him, still holding her mother's hand. We proved it. Now let them go. I said I'd take the deal. I didn't say when. Luca moved then, fast. He grabbed the nearest man's gun and fired twice before anyone could react. Both of Rossi's guards dropped. Rossi spun toward Luca, raising his own weapon, but Arya was faster. She grabbed a chair and swung it with everything she had. It connected with Rossi's arm, sending the gun flying. Luca was on him in seconds. They hit the ground hard, grappling for control. Rossi was bigger, but Luca was faster, meaner. The third guard raised his gun toward Luca's back. Elena grabbed a lamp and smashed it over his head. He went down like a sack of bricks. Luca pinned Rossi to the floor, forearm pressed against his throat. Give me one reason not to finish this. Rossi choked out a laugh. Because you're not a killer. You proved that at the warehouse. I wasn't sure then. I'm sure now. Luca pressed harder. Rossi's face turned red, then purple. Luca, stop, Arya said. He didn't move. Luca, please. His eyes flicked to her, wild, desperate. If you kill him, it doesn't end, she said. It just keeps going. More revenge, more blood, more people looking over their shoulders for the rest of their lives. Is that what you want? I want justice. This isn't justice, it's murder. He tried to kill us, all of us. I know, but we're still alive, and we can walk away, right now, together. Luca's hand shook. Then he pulled back. Rossi gasped for air, coughing and sputtering. Luca stood and looked down at him. If I ever see you again, if you ever come near my family again, I won't hesitate. Understand? Rossi nodded, still wheezing. Luca turned to Arya and Elena. Let's go. They didn't wait. They ran for the car, Luca's parked out front, and piled in. Luca floored it, gravel spraying as they tore down the road. No one spoke for the first 10 minutes. Then Elena broke the silence. Thank you, both of you. Arya turned in her seat to look at her mother. Really look at her. The years showed, lines around her eyes, gray in her hair, a weariness that went bone deep. But underneath it all, she was still the woman from the photos. "Why didn't you come back?" Arya asked. "After all these years, why didn't you try to find me?" Elena's eyes filled with tears. "Because I was afraid. Afraid that if I showed up, I'd bring danger with me. Afraid that the people who wanted me dead would use you to get to me, so I stayed hidden. I convinced myself you were better off without me." "I wasn't. I know that now. But back then, I thought I was protecting you." "Did you ever think about me?" "Every single day. I followed your life as much as I could from a distance. I knew when you graduated high school, when you got your first job, when Richard died." She wiped her eyes. "I wanted to come to his funeral, but I couldn't risk it. He never stopped loving you. I didn't deserve his love." "Maybe not, but he gave it anyway." They drove in silence for a while longer. The city lights appeared on the horizon, a reminder that they were heading back to reality. Back to the mess they'd left behind. When they reached the estate, Luca parked in front of the house. Marco was waiting on the steps, along with half a dozen armed men. "You're alive," Marco said. "That's a good start." "Rossi?" "Probably licking his wounds, but he'll come back eventually. They always do." Luca nodded. "Then we prepare. Double security. Lock down the businesses, and make sure everyone knows. Anyone who sides with Rossi is out." "Already on it." Luca turned to Elena. "You can stay here. It's safe." Elena hesitated. "I don't want to be a burden." "You're not. You're family." The word hung in the air, family. Something none of them had really felt in a long time. They went inside. Mrs. Callahan took one look at Elena and immediately ushered her upstairs to get cleaned up. Arya watched her mother disappear down the hallway, still trying to process everything. Luca touched her arm. "You okay?" "I don't know. Are you?" "No, but I will be." They stood there in the foyer, exhausted and bruised and alive. "What happens now?" Arya asked. "Now we figure out how to live with the mess we made." "That's not much of a plan. It's the best I've got." She almost smiled. "That's terrifying. Welcome to my life." Over the next few days, things started to settle. Elena stayed in the guest room down the hall from Arya. They spent hours talking, filling in the gaps, sharing stories, trying to make up for 26 years of silence. It wasn't easy. There were arguments, tears, moments where the weight of everything felt too heavy to carry. But they kept trying. Luca, meanwhile, threw himself into securing his territory. Meetings, negotiations, quiet threats delivered to anyone who might be thinking about siding with Rossi. He was ruthless and efficient, but Arya noticed something different in him now, a hesitation that hadn't been there before, like he was finally questioning whether this was the life he wanted. One night, she found him in his office, staring at Elena's journal. "Can't sleep?" she asked. "Never could." She sat down across from him. "You've been reading that a lot. It helps. Reminds me why I started this." "And why did you start it?" "To get answers. To make things right." "Did you?" He looked up at her. "I don't know. I found out who killed my father. I found Elena. I stopped Rossi from finishing what Vincent started. But it doesn't feel like I thought it would. What did you think it would feel like?" "Closure, peace, something." He closed the journal. "Instead, I just feel tired." Arya reached across the desk and took his hand. "Then maybe it's time to stop fighting." "I don't know how to do that." "Neither do I, but we could figure it out together." He looked at their joined hands. "You're really not going to leave, are you?" "No? Even though you could. Even though the deal was you'd walk away when this was over." "The deal changed." "When?" "When I realized I didn't want to walk away." Luca's thumb brushed across her knuckles. "Why?" "Because somewhere along the way this stopped being about survival and started being about something else." "What?" "I don't know, but I want to find out." He pulled her hand up and pressed his lips to her knuckles. It wasn't a grand gesture, just a quiet acknowledgement of something shifting between them. "Okay," he said. "Okay? Okay. We figure it out. Together." The next morning, Arya woke to find Elena sitting on the edge of her bed. "We need to talk," her mother said. Arya sat up. "About what?" "About what happens next. For me. You're staying here. Luca said, I can't stay here forever. This isn't my life, and I don't want to be a burden on you or Luca. You're not. Let me finish. Elena took a breath. I've spent 26 years hiding, running, being afraid, and I'm tired of it, so I've made a decision. What kind of decision? I'm going to start over. For real this time. Not hiding, not pretending to be someone else, just living. Arya's throat tightened. You're leaving. Not leaving. Moving on. There's a difference. Where will you go? I don't know yet. Somewhere quiet. Somewhere I can just be myself. Elena reached out and touched Arya's face. But I'm not disappearing. Not this time. I want to be part of your life, if you'll let me. Of course I will. Even after everything? You did what you thought was right, and you kept me safe. That's all that matters. Elena pulled her into a hug. You're so much stronger than I ever was. I learned from the best. Dad taught me how to survive. You taught me how to hope. I didn't teach you anything. Yes, you did. You taught me that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is walk away. And sometimes the bravest thing is coming back. They stayed like that for a while, holding on to each other like they were afraid to let go. Eventually, Elena pulled back. There's something else. What? Marco helped me track down some of my old things I left behind when I ran. She pulled a small envelope from her pocket. These are for you. Arya opened it. Inside were photos. Old ones. A young Elena holding a baby, Richard standing beside her, smiling. The three of them together, looking like a real family. I thought you'd want them, Elena said. Arya's vision blurred. Thank you. You deserve to know where you came from, who you came from. I know now. And I'm glad I do, even if it hurt to find out. Elena stood. I'm going to stay for another week, help you get settled. Then I'll figure out where I'm going next. You'll visit? As often as you'll have me. Good. Elena left, and Arya spent the rest of the morning looking through the photos. There was so much she'd missed, so much she'd never know, but she had this, and it was enough. That evening, Luca called a meeting. Everyone gathered in the main hall. His men, Marco, Elena, Arya, Mrs. Callahan, the whole strange family they'd built. I've made a decision, Luca said. I'm stepping back. The room went silent. What do you mean stepping back? One of his men asked. I mean, I'm done chasing ghosts, done letting the past control the future. I'm going to hand over day-to-day operations to Marco and focus on building something new. Like what? Like a foundation, in my father's name and Elena's. Something that helps people who've been caught in the crossfire of this life. Kids who lost parents, families torn apart, people who deserve a second chance. Marco crossed his arms. You're serious, completely. And what about Rossi? Rossi knows the rules. He comes after me or mine, and I finish it. But if he stays in his lane, I stay in mine. That's a risk. Everything's a risk. This time, I'm choosing a different one. Marco grinned. All right, I'm in. But only because I like the idea of you doing something that doesn't involve guns for once. Luca looked at Arya. What do you think? She walked over and stood beside him. I think it's the smartest thing you've ever done. High praise. Don't let it go to your head. He almost smiled. Wouldn't dream of it. The weeks that followed were strange, peaceful almost. Luca started working on the foundation, using his connections to build something legitimate, something that could do actual good. Arya helped, using the skills she'd learned at the bookstore to organize and plan. Elena left after a week, but she called every few days. She'd found a small town upstate and was renting a cottage. She talked about starting a garden, maybe volunteering at the local library, building a life that was hers. And slowly, so slowly Arya almost didn't notice, the house started to feel less like a prison and more like a home. One night, 3 months after everything fell apart and came back together, Arya found Luca on the balcony overlooking the grounds. Couldn't sleep? She asked. Old habit. She joined him at the railing. You've been different lately. Good different or bad different? Good. Lighter. That's a first. I'm serious. It's like you finally let go of something. He was quiet for a moment. I think I did. When I walked into that farmhouse, I thought I was going to die. And I was okay with it, because I'd spent my whole life chasing this one thing, and it was finally about to be over. But then you showed up, and Elena was there, and suddenly I wasn't ready for it to be over. What changed? I realized I had something to live for. He turned to look at her, and in the moonlight his expression was open in a way she'd never seen before. You, he said. I have you. Arya's heart stuttered. Luca. I know this started wrong. I know I bought you like you were nothing. I know I locked you in this house and treated you like property. And I know I don't deserve a second chance. But I'm asking for one anyway. You don't have to ask. Yes, I do, because you deserve to choose, really choose. Not because your brother sold you, not because you're stuck here, but because you want to be. She reached up and touched his face. I choose this. I choose you. He kissed her then, not the mechanical press of lips at the altar, not a performance, but something real, something that tasted like second chances and new beginnings. When they pulled apart, he rested his forehead against hers. I don't know how to do this, the normal relationship thing. Neither do I. Then we'll figure it out together. Sounds like a plan. They stood there on the balcony, holding on to each other, and for the first time in a long time, the future felt like something worth building toward. 6 months later, Arya stood in front of a ribbon-cutting ceremony. The Foundation's first office was opening downtown, a bright, modern space that would help families caught in the kind of violence that had defined both her and Luca's lives. Elena was there. Marcus, too, looking cleaner and more sober than Arya had seen him in years. He'd apologized. Not enough to fix everything, but enough to start. Luca stood beside her, holding the scissors. You should do it, he said. This was your idea. But it's for people like you, people who deserved better. She took the scissors and cut the ribbon. Cameras flashed. People clapped. It felt surreal. Afterward, as the crowd dispersed, Elena pulled her aside. Your father would be proud. You think so? I know so. He always wanted you to have a life where you could help people, where you could make a difference. I wish he was here to see it. He is, in everything you do. Arya hugged her mother tight. They'd never get back the lost years, but they were building something new, something honest. That night, Arya and Luca sat in the library. Their library now, filled with books they'd actually read, not just for show. We did it, she said. Did what? Survived. Is that all we did? No, we did more than survive. We built something. We're still building. Good. I like building. He pulled her closer. Me too. They'd both been sold into this marriage, both trapped by circumstances they didn't choose, both carrying scars from pasts they couldn't change. But somewhere along the way, they'd found something neither of them expected. Not a fairy tale, not a perfect love story, just two broken people who decided that broken didn't mean beyond repair. And that was enough. More than enough. It was everything.